So let us start. Let us begin, and please feel free to think of questions, put questions in the chat, and we will do our best to come round to responding to them when it gets to that part of the webinar. So where are we? AI, artificial intelligence, and the whole theme of this webinar asking, can it be our friend? Can it be our friend in higher education? And I think if you've been to many webinars on this subject, you'll know that there are far more questions than answers. So I don't promise that there will be concrete answers for you. There will be responses, but let's see where we go on that. One of the things that is, and this is a subject that has engaged EFMD for some time. So this is one of a number of events that has AI as a theme. And Camilla, if you'd like to put up the slide from our colleagues in business development, there is an opportunity if you want to explore this further and in person and with some of the same expert speakers, then Budapest should be your destination on the 15th to 17th of November, which is the EFMD Bachelor Programs Conference held by Corvinus University or hosted by Corvinus in Budapest. So if anyone wants, and I think Diana's going to put the link in the chat so that we get Diana Grote, who's organising this event on behalf of EFMD. If you want any more information, Diana's here today, but also there's the link to explore more. So artificial intelligence, well, it has been with us for many, many years in different forms. We first called it machine learning. It was algorithm-based. I've worked with it. I haven't done a proper job because I've been in higher education for 30 years, but when I was in a proper industry, I was helping building what we then called expert systems for basic things like lending money by banks. How could the system help understand the data? Nowadays, anyone who does their shopping through Amazon or Temu or Alibaba or speaks to Alexa will know that they know far more about us than we do ourselves, or we'd like to admit about ourselves. But in higher education, we've watched over perhaps the past few months when generative AI was brought about, that we've got what I saw as something like the 5 stages of grief within higher education. There was first of all denial, anger, bargaining with different aspects of it, depression, and then the 5 stages of grief suggest acceptance is the next phase. And we've got a lot of that at the moment within higher education, a lot of acceptance. This is with us. It's part of our futures. How do we best use it? How do we best respond to it? So without further ado, we have on our panel today 3 distinguished speakers. We have Dr. Raul Villamaren Rodriguez, who is Vice President of Watson University in Hyderabad, India. Say hello, Raul.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. I see people normally are unable to. Thank you for that.
Great pleasure, Raul. We also have Professor David Lefebvre from Imperial College, a business school at Imperial College in the UK. Hi, David.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
And last but not least, Professor Agnes Kulkulska-Hume, Learning Futures Programme Lead at the Institute of Education Technology, Open University in the UK. Hi, Agnes.
Hi, it's great to be here, and I'm really looking forward to this webinar.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, then we have a question to open. What we're going to do is ask the participants, our panel members, to respond to some quite open questions, first of all, but then to come on to your own question. So please make sure you use that chat facility for doing that. Before we go there, Camilla's going to launch our poll just to see what sort of reaction you've had to AI in higher education. And you can choose as many of those responses that fit, and there might be another response you want to give, which please, because there's women and children present, make it clean. And that's going to be very useful to inform our panelists as to the level of experience and expertise we have in the audience. Okay, and I just wonder how many of those 5 stages of grief people had to go through to get to those responses. I think we're nearly there. Anyone, just the last couple of opportunities to answer that poll. If you'd like to end the poll, Camilla, and if we can share the results. There we have it, you know, so most people, there's an opportunity for anyone who put other, the one person there, if there's other reactions that you'd like to share with us. But we can see there that sort of immediate one of changing assessment to avoid students, learners using AI in ways that the curriculum and the assessment challenge were never designed to cope with. But I like to see, look at that, there's 59% of you saying integration into the curriculum. And I think we might well explore that as we're going through. Thank you, Camilla, for that. That gives us a nice picture. And I will now respond, I'll give my first question to our panelists. And if we can start with Agnes, if you'd like to start, go on then to David and to Raoul. And it is the question, what is AI? You know, can we please give our own understanding of what we are thinking about when we think of AI in a higher education setting? Agnes.
Yeah, it's an interesting term actually, because I think it's quite mystifying in some respects. You mentioned other related terms like machine learning and so on, and of course it's a field or a discipline, and it's also smart tools that we are using. So it is quite confusing for people to get their heads around what it is. But currently, of course, when we talk about AI, we're talking about generative AI for most of the time. And these are the smart tools that generate text, but also images. They generate music, they generate human voices, and so on. So they are incredibly sophisticated tools that help people to think and to collaborate, to produce new artifacts, and therefore they affect all aspects of teaching, learning, and assessment, and how institutions run things, really. Very different approach to the ways that we interacted with computers previously. So the new approach is very conversational. It's very collaborative. We have to be able to devise clear instructions and collaborate with the tools to produce the best results. So it is a very different era that we are entering now, which has lots of positives and negatives, which I'm sure we'll discuss today.
Always one who doesn't switch their microphone back on, isn't there? It was me. David.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with Agnes. Perhaps I could, broaden the definition a little bit. I mean, so we have this enormous field called AI, and within that we have generative AI, which is one particular application. But perhaps these days, the reason we're here talking about AI is because of these machine learning models, these statistical learning models, and these are, complex mathematical models that can be trained on historical data in order to make predictions on future data sets. So, I mean, that sounds rather dull, but what's happened recently is that these data sets have become absolutely enormous. I think GPT-4, for example, has 1.8 trillion parameters within the model. So the scope of these models is enormous. Processing power has increased significantly, and we also have a huge increase in data. So what we have are these machine learning models operating at enormous scale, and I think it's these machine learning models that we're really going to be sort of focusing on over the coming decade. My view of the world is that generative AI, the open AI models and others are perhaps the first manifestation of the power of these models in our world. But over the next 2 to 3 years, I suspect that there'll be a number of other AI applications that emerge. So my view on the world is that we have these huge neural nets that are able to operate in an intelligent way. So we have a new form of intelligence in the world for the first time, a digital intelligence. These digital intelligences are going to impact every aspect of our society, including higher education. I think generative AI is the first manifestation of this, and we're all scrambling to understand what generative AI is. But I expect we'll see 3 or 4 other technologies emerge in the next 3 to 4 years, which are just as impactful. So I think it's useful to think about AI evolving over a broad horizon, perhaps 10 or 20 years, with a number of significant technologies emerging in the short term that are going to sort of impact us all.
Once again, thank you, David. Raoul, your thoughts on this?
Well, Kit, I will take 2 stands. One is the diplomatic one, the other is the more cynical, if I may. The diplomatic one is certainly a combination of computer science, mathematical models, and data sets. It's not new in any case. It's been around since 1960s. So it may be new for marketing purposes, but not otherwise. So on the one hand, it has certain improvements. Now, on the cynical front, and not on the cynical application of it, but the understanding of it, is AI is basically a marketing term. It's a coin marketing term because utilizing machine learning, deep learning does not really sell. So if you see post-COVID-19, LinkedIn was plagued with AI experts, certainly. That's a byproduct of digitalization and usage of that digital technology. Unfortunately, and this is what I mostly tend to do when it comes to corporate projects, is I see companies do forget, and this I can speak from my personal expertise, they forget that AI, as it is encompassed, comes originally from cognitive and behavioral psychology, not from computer science. Computer science is the ground application of it, but unless and until you comprehend how the user, consumer, the customer, call it whatever may be appropriate, reacts or interacts with that product or that service, the data set is as good as useless. So consequently, major MNCs, of course, names I'm not going to name here, but major MNCs do tend to forget that this is the key element, not as much the technological aspects. And anyways, I'll rest my case here, otherwise we'll run out of the webinar.
Can I respond to that, Pete, a little bit?
Yeah. Sure, David.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Raoul, because it is interesting that people have been working in this field for a long time. Sometimes get sort of wonder what all the fuss is about. So if you've been working on AI for the past 10 years, you've seen this as a steady evolution of technology, and you're sort of caught by surprise. Why is everyone suddenly talking about this? There's no sort of big bang, but I think the big bang is the fact that these technologies have now been released into society. And instead of specialists working on these subjects, everybody is now engaging with them and applying. And I think it's the engagement of sort of non-AI specialists that is causing this to be such a phenomenon. So yeah, it is certainly the case that a lot of people, a lot of computer scientists here at Imperial are saying, well, what's all the fuss? We've been doing this for years. Why is everyone suddenly interested? But I think the pivot was that sudden entry of OpenAI into the public domain and the subsequent engagement from the mass public.
Well, let's stay with you.
Yeah, Raoul,
let's stay with you, David.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Raoul, you want to?
No, I really don't want to spoil the flow of questions. That's why I'm not getting through that. But just one last comment is Google, Microsoft, and the like are now hiring more psychologists and philosophers than computer scientists for AI development. So you wonder why. So I just leave it there. Now this may create a larger threat for further discussion later.
Okay, thank you for sort of bringing me back to that role. Let's stay with you. I was going to stay with David, but let's stay with you on this next open question, because one of the themes from a lot of the discussion we've seen is that there will be change. And we've just hinted at some of that in whether there's a long history to it or people are new to this area or just become aware of AI. But higher education has had a pretty settled world for, some would say, decades, some would say hundreds of years, the same sort of model. What are the, first of all, short-term and then longer-term changes that we can anticipate in our own industry, in our own sphere of higher education and specifically business schools?
It is for me or for David?
Yeah, roll. Yes.
Me. So I am aware what other panelists or attendees may and will highlight, which has to do with personalized learning experiences, improved curriculum, teaching methodology. I'm not going to mention that everybody knows. There is one area which I think can be quite important and intriguing, which is how to exactly master that talent versus technology development. What I mean to say is, can we track down, identify, and nurture talent, both in students or candidates, as well as faculty members, without knowing that talent exists? Basically, with past data, psychometric tests, past performance, past professional experiences, we have that data available, even with the students or the candidates at whichever level of degree. Can we identify talents and do projections and nurture them into that projection, which of course needs to improve its accuracy with time, but that can really redefine the future of higher education. I have some working model on that, but again, not all Easter eggs can be thrown around together. So at the same time, this can be a very important and critical area that will define everything else. What degrees look like, who will deliver those degrees, everything basically that encompasses it. So, well, that's an area that I really would love if that comes across as discussion point.
Thank you, Raoul. If I can go to you, Agnes, with that same question, what sort of shorter and then longer term changes can you foresee?
So maybe I'll answer it in relation to learning and teaching and assessment. What interests me perhaps most of all is the ways in which the tools are empowering the learners to obtain assistance when they need it and in the ways in which they need it. So typically in academia, but also in education more broadly, there's a limited supply of teachers and there are many more students. So when people need help, whatever that help might be, they typically can't get access to it. And now we have these tools that can help at any time. They may not be perfect yet, but they will improve. And key to it is the fact that people can access the tool immediately on their browser, on their app, have a conversation. The one thing that I think we don't often talk about enough is how motivating this can be when you're on your own studying, or you're just lost, you don't understand something, to be able to have a conversational interaction with a tool that can help you, is a big deal, really. And even the tools that we have now show us that those interactions can be of different kinds. They can be a kind of collaboration with the tool. They can be a kind of a tutor, a kind of study buddy. All kinds of different roles can be assumed by the tools. So that's really changing the landscape for learners. They can also interact in different languages, which of course is very relevant to many people. Not always being forced to, let's say, forced to use English, as is often the case. I think in terms of teaching, well, again, already teachers are using the tools to create new curricula, to create materials. So that's a big shift in terms of not having to spend so much time on producing content, for example, and structuring things, but getting help with that. And then in terms of assessment, that's probably had the most focus so far, where we've been very aware of the fact that assessment is going to have to change, or is immediately needing to change, for a number of reasons. I mean, plagiarism might be the most obvious reason, the risk of that, but there are many others as well. I mean, the world is changing, so assessment needs to change along with it. And we can think of course, now different ways of assessing people. And that's a huge challenge, but also really exciting. It's just a very exciting time for educators, since assessment is key to education. We educate so that we can assess whether people have actually learned, changed, transformed themselves. And if we take that view, then it's a very exciting time in education.
Thank you, Agnes. And David, anything you want to share with us on this change topic?
Yeah, I think I share the views of Raoul and Agnes. I guess so what we're working on here at Imperial at the moment is this idea of largely automated digital education systems. So what we believe is that we can combine existing technologies with AI technologies and create digital business schools that are largely automated. So this means that they can operate at scale, they can significantly lower the cost of education, but also maintain high quality. So, we believe this isn't too far away and we can build this. So does this mean that all business schools will, be impacted by this, move towards this model? Absolutely not, because even though it's possible, there's an enormous amount of friction in the system. So for example, first of all, employers need to recognize the quality of these new systems. They'll compare them to our traditional business schools and say, are they of equivalent quality? And in the short term, at least, they'll say, no, they aren't. You have the need for government to recognize these schools. Organizations like EOCCS will need to accredit them. And there'll be a lot of friction there as well. There'll be a lot of friction from the students. At least in the short term, students will not value these sort of largely automated AI systems to the same degree. So there's an enormous amount of external friction. And then we have the friction within business schools themselves. Business schools consist of staff and processes. And both of these are very, they embrace innovation in an incremental way. So it isn't possible for any business school to move from model A to model B. And there's a pattern in the way they adopt these technologies. And what you see in the short term is people adopting these technologies to do exactly what they do now, but in an augmented way. So the first step for us all is that we start to use AI assistants to do what we do already, perhaps more efficiently or slightly better. So examples of this would be using AI for curriculum design, using AI to assess students in the way we assess students already, but using AI to augment that, perhaps give more feedback. Using AI to help us deliver classes, maybe have a AI tutor in the classroom with us. But step one is that all schools will continue to do exactly what they've done before, but layer sort of AI on top of existing processes. The second step, which is much, much harder, is to start applying AI to entire functions. So maybe you start to digitize the whole functions in a business school. It might be the recruitment pathway, or it might be the alumni engagement, or it might be automated assessments, or etc. That's much harder to do, but that may well come, and we'll see sort of AI begin to automate certain functions of the business. And once you've done that, you can then start to do things in a more intelligent, joined up way, and eventually you can get to the idea of a digital business school. But these processes take decades, So I think what we'll see is, in our business schools, we'll begin to first few years, we'll begin to use these AIs to supplement what we do. People might embrace it more significantly later on, but it'd be a long, long path towards the kind of school I envision in the future. And I think what this means is that the radical solutions, the digital business schools, are likely to happen outside our sector and are likely to settle in niches around our world. And in the short term, what we'll do is, we'll all start to embrace AI across what we do, likely through the form of digital assistants, and it'll have the similar kind of impact that the internet had on our world in its first few years. So I think I gave a lot of noise there. I hope that was had some clarity in it.
Very useful, David. No, thank you very much. And there's two things I'll pick up there, and it's very much like the adoption of online learning. There were the champions, those people who piloted and experimented, and people like the Open University, world leaders in that sort of design. But decades later, it hasn't taken over the world. It's not everywhere and everyone. This is something we've noticed in EOCCS certifications, that there are those alternative providers who can build their model based on today's technology without that legacy of the past. Can I just drill down a little more with our panelists before we go? And we're beginning to get some questions through from the audience, and thank you very much for that. Please keep them coming. Raoul mentioned about, and perhaps I'll go back to him first on this. Raoul mentioned about the typical responses we see in this area, the personalization, the individual treatment of people, and that's something that comes from social drivers, more sort of social and economic pressures sometimes, that is well known in online learning. How can AI support those sort of things that allow education, higher education, to be opened up, perhaps become more inclusive? David mentioned cost. Well, cost is one thing, but price is another, and we have to think where, will that actually have an impact on the prices that we're able to offer to different markets for the same level of quality? Raoul, you sort of said you'll let other people speak about this, but what about AI supporting that element of individualization? Is that something desirable? Is that something you can see from the demand in the marketplace, particularly perhaps in India, where you're vice rector?
All right. So if I take the Indian market, with nearly 5,000 universities, which is quite a number, and if you're looking at number of students, and nearly 1.5 to 1.7 billion people, and most of them being in the age group of 20 to 40. If you utilize AI for personalization of content and delivery, ultimately become a trade-off. Either you prioritize personalization or well-rounded education. That's something that we have to decide. Especially, you know how it works. If you begin in higher education, it will always go down to school level. And that has substantial risks, especially, and not just in India, but especially in many other countries with politicization of content and education. If we politicize AI, ultimately, the content and the output will all become the same. It's garbage in, garbage out. So we have to be a bit careful on that so-called personalization because it has tremendous risks adhered to it. That's one thing. Secondly is, even David mentioned about automating certain departments of an organization, including higher education, such as recruitment. The word of caution, though, of course, has certain optimal benefits from the implementation of it, could be how agile that organization really wants to be and how the people in the organization could be agile or not be agile accordingly. Especially if you look at education and personalization of education, we have to look at the students and the candidates. We keep on implementing technologies. When ChatGPT was released in November 2022, and higher education institutions, as you mentioned earlier, went into panic mode and claiming that students are cheating during exams. I mean, I almost fell off the chair because students have been cheating for decades. It's nothing new. ChatGPT just facilitates that. It's not a big deal anyhow. So it was already there, really. So we just try to kind of augment things too drastically because, again, there is lack of agility and lack of understanding at the ground level. And if you would like me, probably in the next coming question or questions, we can talk about regulation of AI because that's a very critical component. So I will not touch that right now, but we can jump at it later. But again, personalization, if at a personal level I have to respond it, I will say thread carefully. If you really want to go all guns out, then do so, but at your own risk because it has socio-cultural motives adhered to it, which again are a psychological component, not a computer science or mathematical component, which we tend to ignore generally, as I mentioned initially.
Okay, I wonder, and both of our other panelists are representing UK institutions, very much smaller marketplaces, let me say, than the numbers Raoul has just shared with us for all of India. Do you see those same sort of themes, Agnes, if I can come to you? Do you see those same sort of ideas really sort of within the decision-making within universities? You know, should we go the whole way, or should we temper this with what, I mean, as far as I can see, what Raoul was saying, common sense?
Well, of course, common sense is always good, but I think I take the view that there are two sort of approaches to personalization. One is personalizing things for the learners. So actually taking the approach that we can find out about their needs and their behaviors and deliver the kind of learning they need accordingly. But a different perspective on personalization is the learner personalizing the learning for themselves. So being an active participant in the learning, using the tools that that will help them, that will enhance their learning, or that will make learning more inclusive for them. And both approaches have their place. I think both are actually applicable to education at scale, which is, I think, what we're talking about. How do we service vast numbers of students? Certainly something that the OU concerns itself with, because we do have very large numbers, and so we're different to other UK institutions in that regard. But even at the OU, we talk about personalization in those two different sort of manifestations. So I think that provides a balanced view as well.
Thank you. And David, I think that this brings you in as the smaller of our three represented universities. personalization, is that, I mean, is that part of that scenario you were painting for us earlier?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps because I do work at a smaller university. I mean, I place myself in the cynic camp when it comes to personalization, and this isn't because you know, I doubt its benefits. It's just because that for any kind of technology to be adopted in our sector, it has to solve a burning problem, you know, a problem that we're all experiencing. If that problem isn't sort of known and well-defined and broadly experienced, then there's almost zero chance of any new technology being adopted at scale. And I can see personalization playing an enormous role in corporate education, you know, where every student has unique goals and aims. But in most of our programs, you know, put aside PhDs, which are highly personalized anyway, but in our taught programs, MBAs, MSCs, students are working to a fixed curriculum. You know, the curriculum is not personal in outcomes. We all take the same assessments. And then the question is, you know, yes, they all come from different starting points. So they all have to have a slightly personalized journey towards that same assessment. But students have highly personalized experience anyway, you know. So if you're a finance professional taking an MBA qualification and you take that finance course, you don't study through every single page like everyone else does. You skip over, you revise, you personalize that experience quite significantly. Students read around the subject too quite a lot. You know, the reading around subject is highly personal. You know, their interactions with peers are personalized. You know, so it's not the case that every student has the same experience anyway. You know, they all have highly unique pathways towards where they want to go. So the question then comes, well, do we place a technology solution in there to make it to enable this personalization to happen more efficiently? And yes, I think the technology could help to make this process more efficient, but that's in the nice to have category. And I think in our world of business education, if the technology is in the nice to have category, then it's doomed. It's not going to be adopted. So I think, you know, I see the benefits, but my practical head says, you know, this is not going to be a major development in our world in the near future, at least. Things will change later as digitization happens more broadly. But in the short term, I can't see these personalization systems being adopted broadly beyond champions and interested parties.
David, thank you very much. And thank you to Raoul and Agnes too for the moment. We're going to go now and I'll ask Camilla, have we got any questions from our audience? And please encourage any other questions from those attending here today. Please do ask our panelists whatever you'd like to ask them about AI.
Yeah, there's one from Vishal. How will AI implementation be different from the global north to the global south? Sorry. So anyone wants to answer that?
Very. I think we've touched on some of that. Shall we have one of our speakers from the global north responding to that first? David or Agnes?
Okay, I can take it. I have several projects with the Global South that are based around the use of technology and the use of the English language in education, and looking at future trends. So AI clearly will be one of those future trends as well. But I think what we're seeing in those contexts in Africa and Asia is often just a lack of access to technology, lack of reliable internet connectivity, issues around costs, cultural barriers to adoption, and so on. So there are already a lot of existing problems. And so when I think about how AI is going to play into that, I do worry actually that people will not be able to take advantage of AI necessarily, especially it would be great if people who are currently don't have access to education or are marginalized for various reasons, if they could get access to AI, it could really be transformative, but things aren't set up for that at the moment. And I think, as I said at the beginning, AI is sort of quite difficult to get your head around, even though the tools themselves may seem to be very easy to use and really useful and just easy. In reality, to use any tool really well, you actually need to have a good understanding of it. And you have to be able to be also very literate so that you can formulate instructions in a sophisticated way to really get the most out of the tool. So some of the problems that exist in the world around literacy, around a lack of access to technology or reliable or affordable access, those things I think will be limiting, but there is huge potential for tools that empower learners to really make a difference to their access to education and their success in education as well.
Okay, Roel, are there elements of that you can recognize from your part of the world?
Well, if I take what David and Agnes both mentioned earlier as well with personalization, though David was against it, Agnes was pro it, I would like to highlight maybe an important component, which is personalization is about you personalizing your own content, but how well do you know yourself to personalize anything at all? And that too, an algorithm knowing you better than you know yourself. So it creates a riddle in the picture. The Global South, besides, and of course, depending on each country, but besides any infrastructure or monetary difficulties, it's mostly with a matter of integration and acceptance, not about rejection of the technology, but why do we need it? I know it optimizes things, but do I need more of it? For example, in India, you have certain technologies for digital payments. So far, I've seen, and research also shows that India is one of the most advanced countries with digital payments, especially with distance payments and dark stores across the globe and e-commerce. So it's very clear that they have integrated well this kind of technology. Every individual, even from rural areas, utilizes it quite smoothly because they all have access to very cheap smartphones, mostly originated from China and India. And at the same time, they are fine using that, but they are not fine using other AI technologies because they just don't feel like it. It's not that they don't know it's good for them, but they don't want more of it. So it's a matter of acceptance. So the Global South, though it's very large, but if I take the Asian component of the Global South particularly, it's mostly a matter of, do I need it and why do I need it? Or is it an imposition coming from somewhere else, if you know where I'm coming from? So that is the kind of mindset that has to be broken first in order to make sure that any integration is uniform. But uniformity in the kind of world that we live in, it's going to be quite a roller coaster. So it's not going to happen as smoothly.
Okay, anything to add there, David, from your perspective?
No, nothing valuable I can add there, Keith, I'm afraid. Yeah.
No, well, that's good to get that discussion widened in that way. And thank you very much for that question. Camilla, do we have any others?
Yes, we do. We have another question and one comment. I would read them together, if I may. So the question is, an over-reliance on AI tools may reduce the personal interaction between teachers and students, making education feel more transactional and less human-centered. How to tackle such depersonalization? And we have one note. Conversely, can't we consider that used in a correct way, AI could enable professors to focus on the interactions with students and be less in the descending approach to teaching?
Okay, that's let's say really in your court, first of all, Agnes, because this talks about that area that you have shown great interest in, and that the sort of the human-centered area of our education. So I wonder if you can respond to that. You know, will it depersonalize the whole thing, or will it encourage professors, faculty to have better relationships?
I hope it's the latter. I see AI as a partner in the relationships that are formed between teachers and students, and AI is sort of in there as another entity to relate to. So I think it depends on the systems that are used, on the applications that are used. Some of them do have a tendency to depersonalize the experience, and that's really very bad. So we need to look at the design of systems, making them more I don't know how to describe it, but it's certainly more convivial, I think, is one term that's used in the design industry. But it's sort of relatable, maybe would be another term. Definitely putting the human interaction, human experience at the center. So yes, there are risks, I think, that there'll be an erosion of the status of the teacher as somebody who is knowledgeable, who is an expert, because maybe that knowledge and that expertise can be obtained elsewhere more quickly, more easily. So this is a real risk, and with that comes perhaps a loss of respect for the profession, and that wouldn't be a good thing. Already educators are challenged in that respect, in that regard. So yeah, I think these are some of the challenges that we face. But if we all work towards making sure that that doesn't actually happen, then there's a good chance that we can influence the direction of change. I mean, this is what we should be doing more of, but it's very difficult because the tools just sort of appear out of the blue. Here's a tool, everybody starts using it. There has been no thought into how it's going to be integrated into education, because we weren't expecting these tools. So we're caught out, and we have to sort of respond to that. But if we spend more time thinking about the kinds of future that we would like to have, we would perhaps be more prepared for these tools that suddenly appear and seem to disrupt what we're doing. Because if we've imagined a new future, we can think, does that tool fit into the future we would like to have, and how might it be adapted, or how might it be used in ways that are more amenable to the kind of future we would like to have.
Okay, if I can come to you, David, is that something that's familiar to you in your, as you say, it's not a burning issue at Imperial in particular, the relationship between faculty and learners. So, how do you achieve this sort of balance?
Did I say that, Keith? I think that is a burning question.
Well, I think it's one of those things that you brought in. Forgive me if I misheard them.
No, just to be clear, the relationship between faculty and students at Imperial is definitely a burning issue, and so central to what we do. And but I think Agnes is. I completely agree with Agnes, and it's very interesting listening to you speak, Agnes, there. And I think that's the main answer to the question. But I think there is an additional consideration here, which is quite interesting, which is the tendency for us all to overestimate the value of human interaction. None of us believe that we can possibly be replaced. So, and there's a great quote from Daniel Susskind at Oxford, who's been looking into this, and he says, few people who submit their tax returns using online tools rather than human experts lament the loss of social interaction with their tax advisors. And it says that patients do not want doctors, they want good health. clients do not want litigators. They want to avoid the pitfalls in the first place. So there is a tendency for, in this case, the tax advisors, the doctors, the lawyers to believe that the human interaction is central, but actually what the people wanted was the outcome and not the process. And I think we see other examples of this, especially in the UK with work from home. Managers tend to want people to be in the office mingling, but actually the employees are quite happy being at home. And we have this with online lectures. We have this with lectures now. Faculty want all the students in front of them in the lecture theatre, but actually many students prefer to stay at home and watch it online. So I think I think we have to be careful not to overestimate the value of human interaction. And I think we're in the process of really discovering what the value is now. Now that people have the choice to work from home, the choice to work through AI tools, I think what we're really doing as a society is figuring out, well, what is the value of human interaction? Why do we want to meet face to face? What is the advantage of humans working with other humans? And I think those aspects will become clearer. And it's really only at that stage that we can answer these questions. So I think at the moment, I think we don't really have clarity on what the value of human interaction is.
David, thank you. Yes, I was absolutely sure when we were starting this webinar that we would end up with some fairly strong sort of philosophical viewpoints on this rather than concentrating on the technology. So thank you so much for that. And Roald, anything to add to this particular area about human interaction and where the balance might be struck?
So if I may, Kit and Camilla, I see other questions in the chat are quite broadly related to that question as well.
Yes.
So if I may just take the horse and see exactly what I can answer generically, because I've read the questions. I'm sorry, David and Agnes, I had a bit of a head start while you were talking, I was reading. So I could go through them first. I can see there is a lot of correlation happening with fear of integration, consequences, as well as anxiety, and so on and so forth. Basically, the fear of industrial revolution again. That is what the actual core is. Now, the biggest question, and maybe that is also derived from the previous interventions in different questions asked, we may be asking the questions, just like David highlighted, from a particular bias or standpoint, saying we are highlighting questions from a standpoint, like you can see in the chat, that anxiety is wrong and you should not be anxious and you should not have any anxiety at all, and you should be just at peace with the changes. I will take a bit of a different stand. This kind of anxiety or stress control, of course, also brings about adaptation and brings about certain modifications to your work routine. And particularly with the implementation of AI, such as in the legal sector, as is mentioned in one of the questions, are lawyers or litigators or judges, for that matters, or judiciary system going to go away? Well, most of us wish they do, but they will not. So it will not happen, and neither will legal system. I know I have some lawyers in the room today. I can see some of them as well, which I know personally, but it's not going to change so radically because the industry, the legal sector, will not allow it. It's as simple as that. They will not allow so many people to be unemployed. Similarly, just like with human interactions and academia, will professors welcome being removed from the classroom and replaced by Gen AI or any other technology that may come? Obviously not. It will not happen. They will lobby against it. There will be a lot of protests and so on and so forth. It may be implemented up to a certain point. It may be partially integrated. Yes, some may be even willing to take the charge and take the change, but most of them won't. And from the interactions with different academicians from across the globe, most of them are quite unwilling to integrate it fully because they believe that what they teach and how they teach is the best. So technology cannot replace or improve that in any form, which is of course not true because you can always use different tools to improve your services. But needless to say, and giving a holistic answer because there are many different viewpoints in the chat as well as what David and Agnes mentioned, should we have something to really fear and be anxious about? Yes. definitely. That does not mean that anxiety is gone. It's in fact quite welcome. I, in fact, myself perform quite well when I'm under stress. So anxiety and stress within certain measures are pretty welcome if you are able to drive it in the right direction. And similarly, what do we do with the students? Do we train them for AI replacement or do we train them for skills? You have to train them for everything. They have to be ready for all alternatives in life. Most likely, administrative jobs are going to go away for good, like just David mentioned about automation earlier. That for sure will happen at some point, earlier or later. So students or candidates at different degree levels have to be prepared and have to be able to do it. What we could do, as I think was I mentioned earlier, is try to predict that and understand what kind of talents, skills those candidates, those faculty members may or may not have, and try to guide them in a particular direction where we know they will succeed and possibly just survive over the next 40 years of their life. And then we may just be successful with it. If we just go blindly like we've been doing for the last 1 year, since ChatGPT suddenly kicked in the class, then we are welcoming really big trouble, including government regulation, which is a big problem. So I think with this, Camila, correct me if I'm wrong, I kind of try to touch upon all the key common points in different questions. I may have missed something, but David can add there as well.
I think you got it right. And thanks, Lloyd and Tim, for the discussion in the chat.
Okay, I wonder if I can turn quickly to David and Agnes for any comments on that last one. That Raoul there, it just took over the chair position for me, so brilliant. Thank you very much. Gives me some time off as well. But you know, the anxiety and we know we've discussed before this webinar. You know, there was that final question we're going to. Do we have anything to fear from AI, or will, as Raoul has said, you know, will there be fairly robust sort of defense of what is good at the moment rather than just bowing to AI? Agnes, have you got a view on that?
Yeah, there are legitimate fears, I think. And I think we're in a particular period of history, just coming out of a pandemic, where certainly in the UK, but also globally, there are great concerns around well-being in education, students and teachers' well-being. And in that context, I think overuse of technology may be detrimental. We are, as educators, a caring profession. We see ourselves that way. Computers don't care. They may deliver things very efficiently and amazingly in various ways, but they don't care. That we know they don't care. So that's really at the heart of the current, I think, has to be at the heart of our current thinking. How do we maintain well-being within education, as well as adopting new innovative approaches that have massive potential, no doubt, but how do we balance those two things so that people are well looked after, as well as acquiring education and acquiring new skills and so on?
David, I'm going to leave the last word to you, sir. Anything to fear from AI?
I mean, for society, absolutely yes. I mean, I think if you take a look at the videos produced by Geoffrey Hinton, highlighting the the potential issues with AI becoming independent and controlling our digital systems. I think if you think there's, I think that's the best view to take. If you want to investigate the destructive potential of AI, check out the videos of Geoffrey Hinton, and also note that there's a handful of people who built these systems and thought about them for a very, very long time. And if you look at their stance on the destructive potential of AI, then those who are independent of commerce, you know, those who aren't working for Google or Meta tend to be raising a big red flag saying there's danger here and this is why. And those who are working for Meta or OpenAI, you know, tend to diminish the destructive potential. But I think we should be alert to the dangers of AI. You know, within management education, you know, there's two things that tend to cause concern for the students. One is whether they get into a university or not, and secondly, you know, how do they pass their assessments or not? And I think as we adopt AI systems in both these areas, we have to be alert to not over relying on them. We saw what happened recently when people started to use ChatGPT detection tools and started failing students because they said they plagiarized using ChatGPT, and then we discovered that these tools were actually not particularly accurate, and we failed many students who actually hadn't cheated at all. You know, so we do have to be skeptical about these tools and not over rely on them.
Well, can I have to draw that to a close, David? Thank you so much for that. We're going to let our audience go, but not before they've filled in a feedback poll for us. And while Camilla is putting that up, let me please thank you, the three of you, to Agnes Hume from the OU, to Raul Villamar Rodriguez, and to you, David Lefebvre. Thank you so much for being part of this, and I wish I was there in Budapest.